Hi, welcome to Truth and Reality. I'm Ashley. I'm so glad that you're here with us. This podcast is dedicated to just that, talking about the ups, the downs, the in betweens of life, and how God, our faith, fits into all those spaces. So I'm here again with Melissa. Hey, Melissa.
Hey Ash, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
We made it. Made it through another week of school, probably with a lot of other moms or listeners, right? So cheers to that.
First two
What
weeks of school.
we did it. I don't know about you. It's just been interesting. I'll say that, but we can get into that later in this talk. So, what you drinking today?
I have a latte. How about you?
I do as well. It's that kind of day. I need to stay caffeinated for the rest of the day's activities. So,
Yeah, absolutely, which is
I
good.
was I was actually thinking, because this glass is not very full, I've drank a lot of it, and I was thinking so much about life and how truly, I don't know about you, sometimes I can live very like half full, not like full to the top. And what does that look like? And not to say it's always a bad thing, Ash, but I think sometimes living in that glass half full is meaning that I'm not able to give out and do to other things. But maybe we'll talk about that. But I was just thinking this illustration as we probably chat today about life and self care and what self care looks like. And probably it's different for you than for me. But I know we're going to get into that here as we chat. But I was thinking about that as I drink my coffee.
That's true. You can't pour from an empty cup and you can pour from a half full cup, but it's kind of costs more or it feels like you don't want to give out as much, right? When you're only half full.
Right. It's so
Yep.
true.
Yeah.
Nor
Yeah.
do you want to share, like you said, have a half a glass and it's like, or even drinking a soda and your kid wants to sip and you're like, really? I don't want to really share, you know?
It's
We've
good.
all
It's
been
a
there.
good
Yep.
yeah, we have. It's a good
Hmm.
illustration because it's like when you're full and when we talk about self-care and taking care of ourselves and making sure our needs are met and we are in a healthy place, then our cup is full and we're pouring out. So we're going to talk about that today because self-care, I know we talked about in the previous episode. We just did like a big overview of it. We're kind of going to get into some of the details today, and we were just talking that self care encompasses a lot of areas of our life, right? Like there are the practical things, there are the physical self care, the emotional
Yep.
self care, the spiritual self care. So we're going to kind of talk about all of that because they all have a part in self care, in being a healthy individual. But as we navigate the different relationships and the roles we play, they're going to come into play in different seasons at different paces, and different for each person too. So let's just talk practical. Let's
Yeah.
start at the practical level. What about self care? What are the practical things you do to make sure you get space for self care? And then, like, what might those things be at the very practical level?
Yeah, Ash, I think for me, as just a single mom with three kids at home, I think self care is so important, just even from the practical standpoint of just sleep, right? Making sure that I get a good amount of sleep. Some people thrive off very little sleep. For me, I think it's a big component and I need it, even if it's just getting in bed at an earlier time, kind of unplugging from the day. I think another key part that we've talked a lot about in here, but for me, working out, making that a routine. You've really done a good job holding me accountable this week, texting me, making sure I was going to the gym. So thank you. But keeping that repetitive routine of getting into the gym and moving my body just for me, not just necessarily for what the scale says, but for myself mentally.
Hmm.
Doing good habits. And you and I have talked about that, habits of good fueling my body and eating well, right? We all are going to have a frozen pizza or swing through a Culver's or Chick-fil-A, but I think fueling ourselves and just taking care of my temple is a big part of that. I think another practical thing for me is just honestly balancing the week and looking at my schedule on Sunday night and looking at how much I've committed to, how much I'm doing. And also, I think you and I just had this discussion the other day at the gym, is saying no sometimes to things because I need time to recharge. And I don't know about
Hmm.
you, like that time requires me being alone. Tonight is Friday night, and I would love to have plans, but I know after the week that I've had, I just need to slow down, be with the kids, watch a movie at home, and order pizza and be okay. So, those are just some practical things. How about for you? What would it be for you, or what does it look like?
Yeah. I think a lot of the practical things are the same, like grocery shopping and knowing what I'm going to feed myself, feed my children, having a
Mhm.
structure and a plan for that, knowing when I'm going to exercise and scheduling it in. I think a lot of what you're saying too, there are a lot, it's hard to fit it all in. I think
Yeah.
when I can write it down and I know when it's coming, then it's less thought to it. And it's just
Yeah.
an automatic routine that happens. And we
Yeah.
talked about how this summer we didn't necessarily have that structure or routine. And now that school's back in session and we have a more, firm routine, it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say easy, but easier to get into the routine of going to the gym or making
Right.
sure we're feeding ourselves or getting enough sleep. And I know for me too, that practical level, that's so challenging when I get off routine to like grab one thing and be like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I get to bed by 9:30.
Yep.
That is me. I have to be in bed
Right.
by 9:30 to get, enough sleep and be refreshed for the next day. So I think practically those are some of the steps that I don't necessarily enjoy
Hmm.
taking or scheduling,
Right.
but when I don't have those things in place, then I get off kilter, then I feel it and it goes into other things. It goes into my emotional capacity. It goes
Right.
into, the spiritual capacity where I'm not having enough time to get up and read my Bible if I'm not going to sleep on time and then I
Hmm.
feel off for the morning. So I think they all kind of lend their hand to each other, right?
Right.
But it's those practical steps. Sometimes it's like I just need one thing, even if it's like, okay, I'm going to get to the gym or I'm going to make sure I have lunch planned every day. That's it, just one meal.
Yep.
So I think it's those baby steps of breaking it down that are the practical steps that help me for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you actually helped me with something too. Like even last Sunday night, it was a really busy weekend with the kids and sports, and we had some family functions. And I think I got to Sunday night feeling very depleted and very almost emotional, just kind of feeling burnt out. And you and I had chatted on the phone, and you reminded me like tomorrow they go back to school, and then you get to go to the gym and start that routine over again of self care. And so it helped put in perspective of like, it's okay. It's just a moment of feeling emotional because I hadn't had a lot of time to take to myself. And so that's where sometimes it feels hard, right? To how to balance all of it. But I think it's a
Hmm.
good reminder always of like looking at the week ahead of coming up and being like, how can I take more of those opportunities, you know?
Yeah. And I think as parents, and a lot of us are parents, or if we're not parents, we have roles or relationships or jobs or things that are in those spaces that we can feel depleted. So making sure we stop or we have the self awareness to know what
Mhm.
we need. I think that's a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Through counseling and doing life coaching, I've gotten a lot of skills to know how to be self-aware, how to know, oh, I'm doing this, so it means this, like what's going on internally. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, having that self-awareness, being like, okay, I have a lot of emotions build up. We're kind of moving into the emotional
Yeah.
self-care, but all those emotions building up, or I have so many thoughts, or I have so many ideas about my career in the future, or I'm really struggling with this child right now and having a hard time.
Mhm.
Taking that time, having the self awareness to be like, one, what do I need? Do I need to call a friend? Do I need to
Yeah.
sit and journal it out? Do I need to go exercise to get some aggression out, which helps,
Yeah.
with that emotional state too? I think that's something with self care that I had to learn how to identify what I needed. How about
Right.
you?
Right. And I agree. I think so much of the self care component as a single parent right now is realizing, like you said, what do I need? And I think that sometimes where I can call you or call someone and be like, can I just vent about the things? Not necessarily saying that we'll find an answer, but just having that place of outlet that you can talk to and be able to, say all of the things going on. Because, yeah, I think a lot of it is trying to identify what is it that I need? What is it that's
Hmm.
making me frustrated? And maybe even in the moment of parenting or even in the moment if you're frustrated at work just kind of feeling depleted, I think I've just noticed even just with the weather changing, just stepping outside and like going for a walk yesterday, it's like I just took the dog for a walk for 10 minutes just to kind of reset, figure out what was frustrating me. And it was just interesting, even in that moment, 10 minutes to reset made me realize
Hmm.
like I need to do this more often, taking these self-care moments even if they're small, to just reset and step away from whatever that is.
Yeah. And I like that, like resting, like pausing, taking a break. It was interesting. We were at a soccer game last night, a varsity soccer game watching, and they give red and yellow cards. This just made me think of that, right?
Yeah.
So when they're on the field and they have a foul and they've had a few fouls, the ref will give them a yellow card and they have to come out of the game. And I don't know any other sport that does that, that
No,
makes
I was just,
people pause when they're
no.
emotionally unregulated or physically unregulated, that makes people actually pause and come out. And I didn't understand that that happened in soccer until yesterday because I don't know anything about soccer. So it was funny to me because I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I should have that at home, like sitting on
100.
my shelf for me so I could go grab the yellow card and being like, oh, I need to take a break. And just having that self awareness of like, what do I need in this moment? And I think
Yeah,
sometimes we move too fast through life that we don't stop to even understand. We don't have the emotional awareness of like,
right,
oh, something's off.
right,
That's for me. I just sometimes plow through the schedules and the details and everything until I get to a point where I'm like, oh, okay, now like an emotional breakdown, or I get mad
right.
at my kids, or like I get sick or something. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay, maybe we need to slow the pace of life. Maybe I need to create space to understand, or is there something missing? And I just loved that last night. I was sitting with a couple other moms and we
yeah,
were like, gosh, wouldn't that be awesome? Like, even to give our kids and have that
yeah.
visual
There's
of
that.
like, there's nothing wrong. Like, let's just self regulate here for a second. Can we
Yeah,
pause? Can we slow down?
yeah.
Right?
I love.
Yeah.
I implement it at my house. I mean, I love that word that you even said pause, because a lot of times just even navigating parenting, even just through, schedules with school and sports, I will use that word. And I think I've used it at the gym with you guys, even not intentionally, but I'll be like, I'll stick my finger up and say pause. And it more just is me to gather a moment as a parent, maybe not say something that I regret, to give my kids a moment in the emotion or emotional moment. I had
Hmm.
a friend say something harsh the other day to me, and I really wanted to kind of snap back. And I said, can we just pause for a minute here? I just think this conversation went in the direction that it shouldn't have. And so I think it's important, like you said, in this busy time that we're in, to take those moments, reflect, realize. And truly, with my friend, it was a misunderstanding. I took it personally. She meant something that came out of context. And so I think those pause yellow cards, I will take that in a heartbeat and use those and implement those. And we should probably do it more, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What
And
would you say?
along,
Go ahead.
oh, no, you go.
I was just going to say, from a spiritual component, like how do you bring self care in, or what do you do, Ash? Like for people listening that maybe don't have a spiritual component in their life but are looking to or seeking to, where would
Mhm.
you say to start, and what's worked for you along this journey of your faith and what's helped you?
Yeah. I think that a huge part of self-care for me, spiritually speaking, is sitting at night and reflecting on the day,
Mm.
pausing, having quiet space, asking God, like, if I have questions or if something's concerning me, my cares or anxieties or worries, like bringing them to the forefront of my
Mm.
mind. I think that's a huge space where I sit and I journal, or I'll play music and I will picture God sitting at the foot of my bed, Jesus sitting at the foot of my bed, and I'll talk
Mm.
like a friend. So that's how I do it. So I feel like that's been a huge component when I don't have that time. They wouldn't be like I've been doing it every day, but if I miss a few days in a row, which have happened, like I can feel that emotionally that I am not as grounded as I was before. Um, so having that space, I will sometimes journal, I'll sometimes read the Psalms, I'll write Psalms
Yeah.
out, from my perspective. And so I think that's been huge for me. I also do that periodically. It's not always at night. Sometimes it's like on a run or a walk. Like I will sing. I'll put on worship music and I'll go run or walk, and I will ask God, like, speak to me in this moment, being outside, doing things like that. I think spending time in that place where I'm detached from the past and from whatever concerns I have in the future, like being present with God. I'd say that's
Mhm.
one of the key things that has helped me over the last 5 years is hearing God's voice and sitting and creating that space to hear from Him.
Yeah.
How
It's so
about
interesting
you?
because mine is totally opposite. So it's more the morning. You say nighttime, and I'm like, it hasn't even dawned on me, because I think my bedtime evening routine, and my kids are a little bit older, so it's so late that it's always that morning time. I try and get up
Mhm.
by like 5:30 and just take a moment of, like you said, reading the Psalms. Or even I start with just gratitude and journaling what I'm grateful for, what has gone well in my life, what I'm struggling with, just to kind of get out of my head maybe yesterday's thoughts and recreate a new, just set for the day. Like today's going to be a good day. Like I believe great things ahead for my kids and I. Another thing, I do a lot on a run outside, but I sometimes will just get in the car and drive, and not
Mhm.
necessarily nowhere, but I have a lot of errands to run. So I'll just take that time of quiet in the car and even just ask God, where are you at? You know, what is going on? How do you feel about this? Or kind of just talking to him almost like he's the passenger in the seat next to
Mhm.
me and just sharing my heart. Like, I said last week, this feels like a really lonely season.
Mhm.
I feel weary at times as a single parent, but I know that you will help me find the strength that I need. And so that might look silly to the guy probably driving next to me, but I feel like it's a very intimate moment where God can hear my heart. And I do believe he cares and he listens, and I'm
Mhm.
sure you would agree. And I've seen, I've felt his presence more than anything, even in those moments. Not
Yes.
necessarily an answer or a clarity, for someone listening who's newer in their faith, but I definitely feel a peace in that moment. So,
Yeah. That's good because we don't always get the answers we want or we think we need or whatnot, but God like shows up. He gives us peace. He heals portions of us. He shows us his presence. He can help us feel loved. Like I also was having a lonely moment in the other day and I went and I sat on a dock and I journaled out
mhm,
all I was feeling. And as I was doing that, often that's when I hear God speaking after I've gotten everything out of my own head that I feel concerned about or want or whatever. And I just felt like an overwhelming sense of peace and love. And I couldn't explain it. I couldn't even get words to it. And
mm,
I just felt this sense of love. And I was like, huh, that was so interesting. It's just those moments, I think, that continually feed your soul. And I
yeah,
want to have those more frequently,
I
not,
to-
once a month or here and there. And I think that's the self care too. I also
mhm,
think having friendships with
mhm,
like yourself or some of our other girlfriends where they can encourage you where you're like, hey, I am struggling, like bearing your soul to another and
yeah.
having that encouragement. They're like, no, I see what's happening here, or you got to keep going, or God's not done. And having
Yep.
other people also speak truth into your life, I think is really important.
No, I agree. I think you and I have seen just the beauty and the value of friendship and having those people that you can confide in, safe people that don't judge where you're at. That sometimes even just being a good friend is just being a good listener, but also encouragement and just holding this space, whether it's a hug or you just saying, like, I
Mhm.
love you, you got this, I'm proud of you. I think words are big to me. Just the reassurance to someone like, hey, you're doing a great job. I think we can be hard on ourselves. You and I have talked about that. Like, I need to work a little bit in my self-care time of being kinder to myself and realizing I'm
Mhm.
juggling a lot of hats, you know? And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah. I
role
think
not go ahead.
that mental piece you just said, when you said like that I need to have that self-care in my thoughts, I was like, I interrupted you. I'm sorry, but I'm like, oh, that right there. Like
Right.
that's a huge thing too. Like making sure we're so hard on ourselves, like you said, that we're not judging and shaming and calling ourselves things that we like God would never call us and we're not. I think
Right.
that mental game is huge in self-care too. And I know we've talked about that with identity as well,
Yeah.
like going through those thoughts. Yeah, catching
Well, and
ourselves.
I think I'll be really honest and frank because the conversation happened with you, and just maybe it helps someone listening on here, someone watching this. Last week was the first week of school, and it was hard on me, and I felt like I was not doing a good job. And I think I remember calling you. I call you a lot, but I was like broke down in tears, and I just felt like a failure as a mom. We couldn't find the iPad on the first day, like didn't write the school supplies, like I had missed a form that was important, and it just felt like thing after thing after thing. And I think my mind went there and I started to believe the lies that I was like, I am not doing this well. And I felt like a failure to the teachers. And I just remember calling you crying, like, I'm just not doing a great job at this. And I think we have to be kind on ourselves and realize what we are good at and realizing we're juggling a lot of things. And I think you helped me grab that thought and grab that moment of just like, you know what, Melissa, you're doing a great job. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things you're doing right. And so I think our mind is such a powerful tool that we have to just be so mindful of in that moment, because you just helped me just even grab the thought and it changed the trajectory of the day. But at the moment, I was just feeling down and out, like, Ash, I am just not doing a great job, which
Yeah.
we've all struggled, right? We all
Yeah,
feel that
absolutely.
ourselves, and we compare, we live in a world of comparison. And so I think we need to be kinder to ourselves as women, as mothers, as, coworkers, as friends. And so
Mhm.
I am speaking to myself just as much in this moment.
Same, same. And I think when we have those spaces of self-care physically, emotionally, spiritually, like you're talking, when we are
Mhm.
making sure we're pouring in or drinking good things or getting
Yeah.
good input in, right? Then, we can live a little healthier. We can catch our thoughts a little quicker. It's not saying we're going to
Yeah.
be perfect or we're not going to think the
Totally.
things or we're not going to have hard days. It just means like we can stop it a little quicker or notice it a little sooner or be like, "Oh, I noticed that. I'm going to make a different choice this time." Like I've had
Yeah.
moments like that where I'm like, "Oh, I could do this or this. I'm going to choose this." And I think those are the things with self-care that when we have them done consistently, when we
Yeah.
are really self-aware of what do we need, when do we need it, how do we balance that with our kids or our spouse or our friends or what we're mixed in,
Yeah.
then our lives can be a little bit, I would say we could be more aware of our lives
Right.
because I'm not saying none of that stuff pops up. It still
Yeah.
pops up, but we can
100%.
notice it and then be like,
Yep.
"Oh, this is what I need," right? Because we're human. And so I think like that huge thing of that self-care over consistency over time
Yeah.
really has helped me. And then I notice it fall off. Oh, let's get back on the consistency bandwagon. Here we go again. So I think
Right.
that's so good.
And I think one thing that I'll just add to this conversation is really you and I have talked about is just our capacity and what we're able to do in the season and not getting in a comparison trap in self care and doing things. What I can do in the season looked really different than 3 years ago. What you do, and I don't compare us as friends, but I'm like, I think I said to you the other day, like, you have a lot on your plate. And so do I in a different way. But I think just looking and evaluating and making sure, what do we have the capacity to do and realizing, you were like, I'm in school and doing this and I have this long left. So then it's like, okay, yep, I can do this for the season. For
Mhm.
me, like football is just these next 2 months. I have the ability to do, can do this. So I think realizing it and seeing that season and just, being able to say no to things, but also know like it's just for a season, and what is our capacity, realizing that in self-care, what do we have the capability of doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's different between people and seasons, like you're saying with myself, like, I'm in grad school.
Yeah.
I don't really have an option to not be in grad school, it's something I have to do, and
Yeah.
so in this season, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I have to create space for that, so something else has to shift or move,
Yep.
but it's only a season," and then I'm like, "Okay," so you know what I mean? And I think that when you think ahead of time, when you can plan, when you can see it, when you know it's only for a short while, like
Yep.
to know your season, right?
Yep.
And some seasons it's to move, some seasons it's really to like be rooted. There are different seasons and I think sometimes that's important, like you're saying, to understand when it comes along with self-care. What season are you in?
Yeah.
We were in healing seasons for a
Oh,
long time,
that felt like
and
a
we
long season. Yeah, nor would
and
I
we
rush
still
it.
are,
Looking back
but yeah.
now, right? There's still components, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I think I said that to you the other day, and not to rush that season. But I like what you said. Like, certain seasons you have to pull other things out of it and not do what you used to do. And now like the gym's back into my season of life because the kids are in school, so I can do that. So I can have more self care. So I think these
Yeah.
are all great things, and hopefully practical and spiritual tools and just everyday tools that people can take and apply and help them along the journey as they've helped us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing and
Yeah.
thanks for continuing the conversation on self care. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Peace Runs Deep, and we will see you next time.